The vast majority of colleagues have already sent me the corresponding commentary on President Milei's speech last week in Davos. And some of them say, that's all very well, but what would you comment on, Mr. Professor? It's an intelligent question. I, as a student, would ask it too, and without wanting to condition them, especially because there are some of them who have joined late. I'm going to tell you and give you my comments on President Javier Milei's speech last week in Davos. Javier Milei gave a brief, concise, short, concise, concrete, and very brilliant, which does not extend beyond more than 27 minutes. And curiously enough, the content of this lesson, the main thread of this year's political economy course in this faculty. So it fits us like a glove. When I listened to the speech, I said, but if this is precisely what we are going to give and what is indicated in the program, what better thing than to ask 87 students enrolled in this program that at the beginning of the course to read the speech, because this will give them a panoramic view of what we are going to learn together over the next 4 months. And that is the reason now you know that you are going to give them this homework, this work, this activity to do at home. Home. What does the president say? First of all, we are going to summarize very briefly what he is saying, and then we will comment on it in more detail. The truth is that the content of the conference is very clear. It says that mankind has experienced throughout history, especially in the last 200 years, an unlimited economic prosperity, which moreover has been accelerating. Secondly, it says that this prosperity is the result of the market economy. He says that this prosperity is the result of individual freedom, of respect for private property, of the free enterprise economy, and the capitalist system. That is the second thesis. The third one says that socialism, he calls it. Maria, throughout the lecture, sometimes he calls it socialism, other times he calls it collectivism. He says that socialism and collectivism are impoverishing, that wherever they have prevailed, they have condemned humanity to poverty. But he not only says that they are impoverishing, he says that they are immoral and that they are responsible for the death of people. And that they are also responsible for the death by murder of more than 100 million people. I think he says it literally. Now we are going to read it. Now we are going to read it. Another essential idea of the speech. He gives as an example his own country, Argentina, by the way. We had 2 Argentinian students. They are around here. Where are you from? And you? Come on, we have 2 good ones. Let's hear it for those from Buenos Aires. No, it's not every year that we have the opportunity to enjoy 2 Argentinian students from Buenos Aires. Returning, he gives as an example his own country, Argentina, which from being the richest of the richest countries in the world, as a result of its liberal constitution, until the second decade of the 20th century, has been ruined as a result of interventionist and socialist policies that have been taken in that country since then. With this example, he says that the West is in danger because he believes he detects that cultural trends in the West are betraying the principles of the market economy on which this development and prosperity has been built. He says that socialism, again, is a threat, but that it is necessary to redefine the term socialism. And here I am taking a point because he owes this to me. He says that socialism, again, is a threat, but that the term socialism must be redefined. and that we must redefine the term socialism. More than socialism, we must speak of statism, any system of institutional aggression against the free exercise of human action, and that statism prevails everywhere. And then, it also refers to two other realities, that there is a kind of cultural battle that in the face of the success of capitalism, since they have practically run out of proletarians, it is necessary to look for other victims to unite to justify the banner of state intervention. Feminism, proletarianism, environment, etc. are mentioned. That is an essential idea. And finally, he ends by saying that everyone is infected by socialism, that it makes no difference whether they are Nazis, socialists, fascists, Christian Democrats, Social Democrats, American liberals, GOP, Grand Old Party, etc. And it ends with a hymn in favor of freedom and the exercise of the entrepreneurial function. This is basically what Chairman Milei says, and we will very briefly read a few sentences to see how, in his own words, he expresses himself. For example, he says on page 2, the conclusion is obvious. Far from being the cause of our problems, free enterprise capitalism as an economic system is the only tool we have to end hunger, poverty, and destitution across the globe. The empirical evidence, he adds, is unquestionable. He refers to the correct economic theory of the Austrian School and quotes Israel Kidner, who is one of my mentors. He is still alive. I was on the phone with him 2 or 3 days ago, a professor of merit at New York University, who conceives of the market as a process of discovery and creativity. He refers to the concept of freedom, referring to the traditional definition that he uses, which is that of my Argentinian colleague, Alberto Venegas Lynch. He makes a very sharp criticism of libertarian economists. He says there are even many libertarian economists who do not understand how the market works. It is a veiled criticism of Milton Friedman. We are going to talk about this in a moment. The market is not a supply and demand curve on a graph. The market is a mechanism of social cooperation where there is voluntary exchange. I don't like this mechanism. I would have put a process, but well, you can't ask for pears from an elm tree either. He criticizes neoclassical economists who use a model alien to reality and believe they detect market failures. Defends that in the free market there are no monopolies, and if there are, they are beneficial. And then refers that the interventionists left behind the class struggle based on the economic system to replace it with other supposed social conflicts. And here he enumerates the list of supposed victims. And he ends with this enumeration of collectivists that I mentioned before. And with a hymn to the businessmen to whom he urges, he says, not to let themselves be intimidated neither by the political caste nor by the parasites who live off the state. Do not surrender to a political class which only wants to perpetuate itself in power. You are social benefactors. Let's see, what are you studying? What is your degree in? It is administration and management of companies. You can't hear it. Administration and management of, listen, they are recording you. They are going to see you all over the world. They are interested in what we say here about the business function. And now we are going to make a series of specific comments following this thread. First point on whether the Davos Forum is supposedly a capitalist forum, friendly with the business function. I say this because it has been read in many media. It seems unbelievable. If he was going to a forum of businessmen and capitalists, how could they not agree with him? Make no mistake, it is quite the opposite. We are the object of manipulation by the media. Moreover, very self-serving, it is something similar to what is happening in relation to Adam Smith. If the enemies of freedom and the market put as epigonies of freedom and the market half-heartedly, then it gives them the opportunity so that when they defend their intervention and manipulation of our lives, it is even more profound. The Davos Forum is part of that group of organizations connected with the caste, with the establishment. It is true that there are many businessmen, but largely big businessmen, as Millet says, prebendaries who have accepted the agenda of social engineering, and that if anything characterizes them is their arrogance, and yes, their nose for making money, but at the expense of approaching and flattering the state and the statists. The state and the statists. Then Millet was not in an environment friendly to the market economy. He was not in a forum of capitalists, but he was in a forum that somehow was caught in a state of shock because they are so used to, and the virus of interventionism has absorbed them so much that they could not expect to hear such a frontal attack on what they are used to. I have given the example of this manipulation of the interventionists that also takes place in connection with Adam Smith. They say usually they have succeeded in generalizing the idea that the founder of economics is the great Adam Smith, who also in a way represented the quintessence of liberalism. Do not believe it. Make no mistake. Adam Smith's influence was harmful to the science of economics. In fact, it is the beginning, the embryo of the classical or neoclassical school that Javier Milei expressly criticizes in his speech. Adam Smith abandoned the subjective theory of value, a work in our discipline, and introduced the objective theory of value, according to which value is something intrinsic to things. Subsequently, his disciples said, and what is intrinsic to things? The amount of labor incorporated in them, objective theory, value, labor. Adam Smith, in short, served on a silver platter to the Marxists. A whole erroneous intellectual framework to later found the theory of exploitation and the theory of Marxism. If that is a liberal, may God come down and tell us so. But Adam Smith's supposedly liberal proposals were more than lukewarm.
He's full of contradictions. Adam Smith defended the navigation act, which is the quintessence of interventionism in the field of international trade, control interest rates, public works, public education, etc. In short, Adam Smith at best was a lukewarm social democrat, completely wrong as far as his conception of the market was concerned, for he was only interested in studying what he said was the natural long-run equilibrium price, i.e., that final static stage.
On the basis of which the later neoclassical economists have built the equilibrium model, which is largely to blame for the fact that many believe that state intervention is possible and desirable. And of course, if they say that the epigony and the quintessential example of freedom is Adam Smith, well, if I have seen you, I do not remember. With that, they can justify going even further along the lines of social engineering and socialist interventionism. Then, having clarified the first point regarding the Davos Forum and the context in which President Millet was in. President Millet was, second, empirical evidence. Be careful with the empirical evidence. In the past months, we have explained that history proves nothing. History at most illustrates a correct theory. Indeed, there is no history apart from theory, but there is a historical account based on a correct theory, which is precisely the one presented by Millet in his speech. And what is this historical evidence? It is very simple. It is expressly mentioned that thanks to the market economy and the capitalist system, since the Industrial Revolution, the population of the world has increased ninefold. But we are not only 9 times more, dear students. Today we are 8 billion inhabitants. 200 years ago, there were thousands of cases. Not only are we 8 or 9 times more, but the per capita income, I say that we have not only increased the population multiplied by 8, we are already 8 billion, but what is more important, the per capita income, the average welfare of each one of those people, of those human beings, has been multiplied by 15 times. Let me give you an example. I personally remember, in the year of the Industrial Revolution, the Second Vatican Council, I was a child. Do you know how many people lived on Earth in the year of the Industrial Revolution? In the 62 years, 3,200,000,000 people. Today there are 8 billion, more than twice as many, but what is more important is that those 3,200 were much poorer than the standard of living we have reached today. Thanks to capitalism and the market economy, in the last 20 years, according to official data, 70 million people a year have been lifted out of poverty, 70 million people a year. In 20 years, there are 1,400 million people who have left the threshold of poverty. And thanks to what? The monstrous madness of a communist called Mao Zedong, who ruined his country, was left in tatters. And who cares if it is a white cat or a black cat? The important thing is that it eats mice. Everything can be justified, and it made a 180-degree turn. And China opened up to the circuits of international trade. The market economy and the capitalist system has become the factory of the world. 1.5 billion additional people, by the way, the middle class and the upper class in China, is counted by 200 million, 300 million people, equivalent to the population of the entire European Union. Comparable at least. And the next tiger, which you can be sure of, is India. As soon as India, which has learned its lesson, begins to liberalize its sclerotized economy due to decades of interventionism and social engineering, and also with an advantage because India's political environment, which is an Anglo-Saxon tradition, is a democratic environment, something the Chinese lack. In the 30s of the last century, a young Argentine officer was assigned as military attaché at the Argentine embassy in Rome, Italy, during the years of Mussolini's fascism. That young man was retired because of what, in his eyes, it was a perfect organization of society, imposed by force from above, which also fit perfectly into his military schemes, which is what the army is. What a wonder I am seeing around me. What is Duce and fascism doing in Italy? I wish I could one day do the same in my country. That young man's name was Juan Domingo Perón. And when he returned to Argentina, that is exactly what he did. And he is the main culprit of having plunged Argentina into poverty, which, I repeat, from being one of the richest countries in the world, has become one of the countries, sadly, at the bottom, a country that has a geographical extension 5 times, if I'm not mistaken, that of Spain, with 47 million inhabitants, the same as Spain, and a per capita income that is half that of Portugal. So that you can see the comparison. Until 1920 or 30, Argentina was such a rich country that it attracted immigrants, and among others, my maternal grandfather. My maternal grandfather decided to go to Argentina because it was the Mecca. It was like emigrating to New York, and in fact, he took his ticket and went to Argentina. He had gotten a wonderful job in charge of a wonderful ranch, thousands and thousands of hectares. He arrived with the owner who was, hey man, he has a great face. My grandfather had a great face. How lucky I am. Here a Spaniard, a Galician, to lead these gauchos. But things went awry when he invited my grandfather, as he told me, to pass a room. He opened it and it was full of weapons, rifles, pistols. He said, well, you choose because you have to be armed. At that moment, my grandfather's color turned red. He decided to turn back, bought another ticket, and went back to Spain because he hated guns. It is an anecdote that I give you, but like him, many went to Argentina to earn a living, to make a living in Argentina. And today, on the other hand, the tables have turned. Today it is the Argentines who emigrate to Spain. If I am not mistaken, there are more than 500,000, a little more, 600,000 Argentines in Spain, and very few Spaniards emigrate to Argentina. Something similar to what happened when there was the Iron Curtain. That everybody wanted to leave communist Germany for the capitalist Federal Republic of Germany for a reason. Why is that? For freedom. And this is the third point I wanted to clarify in my comment. What is the concept of freedom? Friedrich Hayek, Nobel Prize winner in economics in 1974, has two spectacular works that you have to read. One is entitled The Foundations of Liberty. It is in its 7th or 8th edition in Spanish, which we publish at Unión Editorial, The Constitution of Liberty in English. The other is Derecho, Legislación y Libertad, Law, Legislation and Liberty. And Hayek explains that there are two opposing definitions of liberty. One has nothing to do with the other. One is the true definition, and the other is the corrupted definition. Because if anything characterizes the enemies of the market, it is their ability to semantically corrupt attractive terms. To make what are called Bissell words, the weasel words, this is taken from one of Shakespeare's plays. You like it. Why a weasel word? Because Shakespeare says that weasels are capable of hollowing out an egg from the inside, leaving the shell intact. Well, that is exactly what the enemies of the market do. That democracy is a very attractive term for people. Well, let's redefine the concept of democracy, popular democracy, or organic democracy. This was Franco's. That the concept of justice is very attractive to citizens. We are going to redefine it by removing all its content, keeping the shell according to our interests. And we introduce a new concept, social justice. We will talk about this. That the concept of rule of law is very attractive. Let's do the same by corrupting its meaning, social rule of law. In short, that the concept of... No, before we go even further, look at the height of brazenness as far as semantic corruption is concerned. We have not said, and now we are going to prove it, and Millet explains it, that it is liberty that advances civilization and leads out of poverty and gives prosperity to the world. And we have not said that the hindrance to this process is collectivism or socialism. Well, look at the semantic corruption. They call themselves progressives. The defenders of state interventionism, socialism, social engineering, and collectivism. They are the progressives. Of course, who is going to be against progress? Do you realize the semantic poison that is introduced into our minds? And now to the concept of freedom, which is the one that interests us. Hayek says that there are two completely opposed concepts of freedom, the correct concept and the corrupted, prostituted concept by the collectivists, precisely in order to get hold of such a beautiful term, that of freedom, and use it instrumentally in pursuit of their social engineering objectives. The correct concept of freedom is very simple. It is the absence of coercion. Period. That is freedom from aggression. It is included in Venegas Lynch's definition of freedom. Freedom. And the lovers of freedom and libertarianism is not a disposition. Do not be mistaken about this. This is a corruption that comes traditionally from Spain, from Ortega y Gasset and Marañón. I am liberal because I have a disposition. And what is your disposition? My disposition is that everything is fine. All behaviors seem fine to me. All behaviors must be respected. That you are part of the 27 types of families invented by the ministry. Oh, how nice. What a modern thing, because I am of a liberal disposition. That you say that the world must be enslaved in pursuit of a grandiose project of social engineering. Well, that is also respectable, because everything must be respected. Perhaps this is the only point on which I would find a small defect in Venegas Lynch's definition, because he says that it is unrestricted respect. Careful, it must be interpreted. It is only respect in the sense that in the system based on freedom, coercion cannot be used in any case against the other human being. That is the true definition of freedom. On the other hand, What is the corrupted, prostituted definition of freedom? It is the definition of freedom as being able to do. That is, I am free if I can achieve what I want. Look at what a difference this makes. I like this lady, and why shouldn't I rape her? I have the right to be free. I like Professor Huerta de Soto's gold car, and why don't I make a fist of it and steal it? Because I have the right, I can do. I can go to the moon, I can save mankind. A power to save humanity. A power to be free. A power to be free. To be able to save humanity. A power. Look at it. It is hidden from us. With what means? And we are given the opportunity, the pretext for the use of the means of systematic state coercion. The pretext that thanks to this, we will be able to achieve nirvana here and now in the world. In other words, just the opposite of what the traditional concept of freedom as the absence of coercion really means. And the absence of coercion means, therefore, respect for private property, for life, respect for voluntary contracts. Contracts are a voluntary agreement. There is no coercion. Both parties are winners, always, because if they were not winning, they would not close the agreement or the contract. Next point, included in the speech of Javier Milei, economic theory. He says, that much of the justification for this interventionism is to be found within the realm of economic science. And he is right. And he is right. And here we, the professors of economics, should sing a mea culpa. Because there are two radically different approaches in our discipline. The right approach and the wrong approach. Let's make a very brief summary of both. What is the right approach to economic science? The one that studies market processes, of which each and every one of us is a part, as reality sounds. It studies the market as a dynamic and evolutionary process driven by the force of the entrepreneurial creativity of each and every one of the 8 billion human beings that make up humanity. By the way, this correct conception of the market is the one traditionally developed by the so-called Austrian School of Economics. But it should not be called the Austrian School of Economics. It should be called the Spanish School of Economics, because it has its origin in the contributions of those brilliant thinkers who were the Spanish scholastics of the Spanish Golden Age. The School of Salamanca, and here you have several of my works, and we will study them throughout this course. Notice how I follow the thread of the content of the program, taking advantage of Professor Millet's speech. And in addition, the correct conception of the market, which is the one we are going to study together, dynamic as a dynamic and evolving process, driven by human entrepreneurial action that continuously and courageously seeks new ends and means to achieve what we consider to be of value in an environment of freedom and with contractual links. This correct conception of the market gives way to another essential conception, which is also one of my humble contributions, the concept of dynamic efficiency. This is very important. It is considered that a company, an organization, a society is all the more efficient, but in dynamic terms, the more it drives creativity and coordination, always in dynamic terms. As opposed to this model of the economy, we have the opposite model, which has been spreading and dominating more and more economics departments, even in the most prestigious universities. Not surprisingly, all of them public or dependent on public money. Here, what is a kind of concatenation or symbiosis between all interest groups? They conceive the study of economics as centered on a static model, a picture, an equilibrium model. I remember the first economics class I took, I think I mentioned it the other day. The professor just at the beginning of the course said, let's assume that all the information in the market is given and does not change. He said that, and from then on, he began to fill the blackboard with mathematical formulas, and the rest of the course as well. Notice that all the information is given and does not change, which is equivalent to taking a photograph. which is equivalent to blocking all the creative capacity of human beings, and from there, building a great mathematical model. We have the case of Pareto, Manual of Political Economy. He says, suppose that humanity disappears. For example, a neutron bomb falls and no human being is left alive. A neutron atomic bomb kills only one biological matter, but not the rest. But Pareto says, if humanity disappears, the economy, as I understand it, will disappear. As I understand it, of equilibrium and mathematics, of course it continues to exist, and I can solve all the problems as long as all human beings before passing away have left me their corresponding map of indifference preference curves. It says it literally. Notice what a phantasmagoric and sickly world the neoclassical economists have in their mind, a world of equilibrium where it comes from the virus originally introduced by Adam Smith, as I have said. For them, the correct efficiency model, the correct concept of efficiency, is not the concept of dynamic efficiency. It is conspicuous by its absence. In their model, there are no human beings creative, there are no entrepreneurs, there is no dynamism. The only thing there is, dynamic stochastic general equilibrium models, for example, and static efficiency, not dynamic, understood in its Parisian sense. A perfect adjustment that would occur in an unreal world of Nirvana, in which everything would have been solved, discovered, and coordinated. And this clash of paradigms is very important. And it is very important that you are aware that we are going to give the course from the perspective of the correct paradigm and not from the perspective of the wrong paradigm. And I am very grateful to President Milei, who has given an economics class of this depth of 23 minutes, because he serves it to me on a platter, as I was saying, to start this course here and now. But the impudence does not stop here. In the world of natural science, which is characterized by the fact that there are constants, and laboratory experiments can be carried out, natural scientists are a little more honest. If they develop a model, compare it with reality, and see that reality refutes the model, they abandon the model, they say that it is scientifically false. This does not happen with the scientists of economics, who follow like lambs the scientists of the natural world, with their same methodology and their same mathematical models. This does not happen. They develop their grandiose, static equilibrium model, where the human being is conspicuous by its absence, and if they see that reality does not coincide with the model, instead of discarding the model, they say it is reality that is wrong. That reality is full of market failures, another of the geniuses, is perfectly explained by President Milei, and that therefore, obviously, prima facie, from the outset, if reality is full of failures, because it does not coincide with my model, which only exists in my mathematical enclosure, this would justify from the outset that the state should impose by force reality, and bring it into the model. That is the scheme. And there is a whole string of programs elaborated by state officials, who are the ones? By state officials, which are the ones that force us to study the supposed market failures, and you can list as many as you want. Millet refers to one of them, the much feared monopoly. And the same thing happens, the same thing that we have seen, that happens with the two conceptions of economics, happens with monopoly. There are two concepts of monopoly, a correct concept and a wrong concept of monopoly. This is where the Austrian school has made its most brilliant contributions. In fact, Millet has ever stated, because Millet was a bad economist, of the mainstream ones, nobody is perfect. And yet, 8 or 10 years ago, he came into contact with the Austrian school and with the classes given at this university. And through the critique of the neoclassical theory of the monopoly of the Austrian school economists, he saw the light. That's what he said. And from there, he became an Austrian economist. Monopoly comes from the Greek monos, one, polin, to sell. For neoclassical economists, the worst of all worlds is monopoly. How is monopoly defined? If in a sector or industry, there is only one seller. And why is monopoly so bad? Because according to my functions of supply, demand, marginal costs, etc., monopoly exploits the consumer, and therefore the state has to create anti-monopoly laws to, using its force people to compete. This is what we have been sold. But this story is false from beginning to end. The relevant issue is not whether there is only one seller in a given sector, among other things, because it is not possible to define in objective and scientific terms the concept of sector or industry. Coca-Cola, what sector is it in? If we say in the beverage sector, there is no monopoly because I can drink wine, I can drink Fanta, I can drink water, I can drink 80 things, we restrict. Soft drinks, I do not know how they say it in the United States. Sodas, they say it sodas, then it is reduced, yes. Because here there is only Pepsi-Cola and Coca-Cola, and we reduce, the industry is smaller. Soft drinks, sweet drinks, dark drinks, and that they also advertise Coca-Cola. In the end, they have a monopoly, of course. Economics professors. I do not have the monopoly of economics professors. There are thousands. But if we say no, economics professors in Madrid, well, there are a few less. Economics professors in the Rey Juan Carlos, less. Economics professors in the Rey Juan Carlos. Specialists in the Austrian tale. I have a monopoly, everyone, in that sense. We would have a monopoly, none. It is a definition that makes no sense, but also, in reality, it is irrelevant. If in a given sector, we seem to observe that there is only one seller. Because in the absence of institutional coercion, the fact that there is only one seller at a given moment, at a given time and place, rather than indicating that there is a tragic situation of monopoly that exports to consumers, indicates just the opposite. That an entrepreneur in certain circumstances has also served consumers by discovering a new product that has revolutionized their lives. Or has been able to sell it much cheaper. Or both things at the same time, that he has been left alone. That monopolist, far from being pursued with the law, with the courts, should be made a monument, a monument, a monument, a monument, a monument, a monument. A monument to him. And the story that he is left alone and exports to consumers does not go. In the market, every day is a new dawn. There are no acquired rights. It is enough for the successful businessman to let his guard down a little, for him to immediately find from under the rocks multiple competitors. And if not, just tell IBM. For half of my life, IBM controlled the market. And then they fell victim to their arrogance and their mainframes. And they laughed at those who went to offer them a personal computer. And what happened? IBM today is practically non-existent. What is important, what is relevant is not whether or not there is a single seller, but whether or not a prebendary entrepreneur, as my law says, one of those of crony capitalism, the result of crony capitalism, has managed to get the state to give him a privilege, a just privilegium, to exploit a good in circumstances of exclusivity. In circumstances of exclusivity, using all the power of the state to prevent the rest of the creative entrepreneurs from accessing that plot of land, to that plot of land. Then, in a market economy, without state coercion monopolies, the so feared monopoly does not exist. And if it exists, it is indicating in a dynamic conception that it is serving consumers better than anyone else. Here, my law makes a slightly more fanciful argument about economies of scale, concentration, etc. But with all due respect, I would put a mini-but here, I would put a mini-but, which could have enriched his argument even better, which he knows perfectly well. But perhaps it is too complex to explain it in this context and in 23 minutes. The dynamic economic theory of the Austrian school explains that the origin of coordination in the market is in the entrepreneurial act, because in every entrepreneurial act there are three effects of extraordinary importance. An information creation effect, the entrepreneur realizes or discovers that there is an opportunity for profit. A resource here is misused and could be sold there at a high price because there is someone else who needs it. The entrepreneurial light bulb goes on. I discover that opportunity for profit, and the great opportunity for profit comes to light. And the great wonder is that all the mismatches that exist in society, which are infinite and continuously changing, why are the mismatches infinite? Because we are 8 billion human beings, each one from his father and mother, with different ideas, volitions, value judgments, etc. The mismatches are immense. The normal thing is that we would all shoot each other to death. And yet, And this is the great wonder that brings economic science. A spontaneous order is generated because each mismatch is embodied in an opportunity for profit or benefit, which is there latent to be discovered by an entrepreneur. He says, Tate, I buy cheap here and sell cheap there. First, the creation of information, then the transmission of information, because when an entrepreneur acts, an act of exchange is reflected with a market price, which is like a signal that indicates in successive waves and throughout humanity that there is demand for that product and that it can be bought or sold at certain prices, and that vitally important information is transmitted thanks to such powerful messages, which in such a compressed form are capable of transmitting information of such great social value, which are the market prices. Creation of information, transmission of information, and the third effect, coordination and adjustment. In the end, the one who was squandering the resource tightens his belt and sacrifices himself because he realizes that motu proprio, in addition, and for his own interest, it is in his interest to economize it and save it for others who need it. And save it for others who need it. As in the example I give, when I studied at Stanford and I was asleep in the mornings behind the garbage truck would say, the shit you throw away is what feeds us. Thank you very much. Of course. And the baker gets up at 4 in the morning and the butcher and the milkman, not for pleasure, to serve us so that we can have breakfast, but for their own interest, because his own interest. Because in a voluntary exchange, we both win, he earns his living and I can have breakfast. The three effects. But the dynamic market concept of the Austrian school demonstrates something else, and this is important. It shows that it is theoretically impossible to organize society from above on the basis of coercive mandates. I am not entering into any political consideration here. I am saying that economic science has shown that the grandiose ideal of engineering is not the same as the ideal of the market. That the grandiose ideal of social engineering and statism are systematically condemned to failure because it is impossible to achieve the objectives that are intended by social engineering. Social engineering is impossible to achieve. And this for the following four reasons. First, it is impossible for the governing body, the group of experts, the ministry, the politicians, I don't care, to achieve the objectives of social engineering. The politicians, I don't care. The Gosplan, Putin, whatever you want, it is impossible. To be done with the immense volume of information that is continuously created and generated by the 8 billion human beings. If not because you believe that the starting point is, let's assume that all the information is given and does not change. And this is the least important argument, because someone could say, and here there is a debate with my disciples of the cyber communists, who say that with the advances of the new computer systems, it is possible to digest and account for an immense volume of information. They are radically wrong, because the new cybernetic systems and the new technologies and the new communications act as a trampoline, that what they do is to multiply exponentially the creative capacity for new information of the 8 billion human beings and make it radically impossible to control it at the state level. But there is a second, much more important argument, and that is that the type of information that is vital for human beings and on which our life depends is information that has peculiar characteristics. It is a know-how, it is not a know-that, it is a tacit information which is only learned by acting. By acting in the particular context of time and place in which we develop our entrepreneurial and creative activity. It is information that cannot be articulated. It cannot be written in an article, neither scientific nor journalistic. It cannot be incorporated in a computer disk. No. I know it because I know it. I know it because I know it. It is information, says the great Michael Polanyi in his book, The Study of Man, which you all have to read this year. It is the information of one who learns to ride a bicycle. Has anyone ever learned to ride a bicycle by reading a book? Not even British eccentrics learn to golf by reading a book. How do you learn to ride a bicycle? By getting on a bike and throwing yourself off and falling off many times by sheer mistake. And the same way you learn how to run a business and make a profit. Steve Jobs went broke twice before he got it right. You can't learn in a book how to woo a pretty woman. You have to try many times and get a lot of pumpkins. That is the information relevant to human life and to civilization, and it cannot be passed on to a central coordinating body to put it in a decree law and give coordinating content to its mandates. But the matter does not stop here. Let's go on. Why socialism is impossible. Why these grandiose programs of social engineering of these elites are impossible. That live in this drunkenness of power are impossible. The information that the state needs to give a coordinating content to its mandates is not the information of today, it is the information of tomorrow, when it promulgates the mandates and wants to modify what it has to organize tomorrow. And it turns out, dear students, that tomorrow's information does not exist because it has not yet been created by the 8 billion creative human beings. Among other things, because if it had already been created, it would not be tomorrow's information, it would be today's information. The information handled by officials and bureaucrats has only archaeological or historical value. It is as if they were determined to drive a car, looking in the mirror, just in the rear view mirror. Of course, the hit and crash was guaranteed. But there is a fourth argument, the definitive one, which explains why socialism is impossible. Dear students, and here my law does have a bearing on this, socialism is coercion. This is the most important thing. He speaks of socialism and collectivism. In fact, my best known book is entitled, in this field, not in that of money, socialism, economic calculation, and entrepreneurial function. We are now in the 7th edition. It has been published in 18 languages. I have been tempted to change the title and put statism, economic calculation, and entrepreneurial function, because in today's state of the art, it would be much clearer. So statism is the desire to impose a social system from above. The truth is that it is a great temptation. Because what our body is asking us is to finish here and now. With all the social problems, using experts and using the state, that is the agenda. But for that is inevitable. And they hide it, all the collectivists dress in sheep's clothing, as if the means did not demand coercion and violence. What characterizes socialism, collectivism, or statism is always violence and coercion. That is to say, a law, a decree, official state police, fines, jail, and if you get out of jail and resist, shot in the back of the neck. Socialism is coercion. If it were all voluntary, there would be no problem. It is violence and coercion. The state is violence and coercion. And that is the fourth and definitive argument, because it turns out that to the extent that the governing body violently impacts on any social parcel of human beings, in that parcel, and to the extent that it impacts the creation of information by ordinary human beings, is blocked, which is precisely what the governing body needs to give a coordinating content to its mandates. Hence the paradox of socialism. The more it strives, the more grandiose its plans, and the more it promises the citizenship to solve them. The greater the conflicts, the greater the failure. But the tragedy is that the failure becomes evident, and always as the interventionists react saying, that is because the citizenship has not collaborated. Because the citizens have not collaborated? That is because we have not been sufficiently coercive. This clearly justifies that we have to intervene much more, a further dose of intervention in a totalitarian process in which the power of the state extends through all the social interstices. Even if it is sold to the citizenry. Of course, it is sometimes so hard. But we have to sell the citizenship as if we were doing something new, and it is invented in the welfare state. Who is going to be against the welfare of the state? This is an issue that Javier Milei, in his speech, does not deal with the welfare state. Are you in favor of the welfare state? Come on, let's decide it democratically, because we are in a democratic society, as our minister, Yolanda, has already said. Who is in favor of 2 months of vacation instead of 30 days? Obviously, 2 months is a much better vacation. Shall we vote by a show of hands? Sure, because we have the whole month of August, 15 days of vacation and 15 days of vacation, right? Minimum wage, 1,100 euros, 1,083. We are going to raise it now. Minimum wage? Man, minimum wage? Do you agree? Let's make a mutation. Man, minimum? 4,000, 5,000 euros to start. Yes or no? Sure, man. Minimum social income? Of course, for God's sake, why had we not thought of it before? But not only those you think of, but Community of Madrid. President Ayuso, aid per child, 500 euros to all mothers earning less than 30,000 euros. 1,500 euros per child per month? It seems little, man, at least 1,000. Man, Ayuso, do not be stingy. And then look at the dynamics we are entering. A democratic system becomes a corrupt system of buying votes with other people's money. My law says so. With the Gita, I think you say in Argentina, of someone else, who supposedly are the rich. But dear students, the rich are very few. And there is not enough to pay even an infinitesimal part of all that party. Those who pay the party are the middle class and the lower class. Even a meliorista pays everything he earns and produces until the month of July. But this is hidden from all citizens. And our mouths are full. Pension system, what a deceit. A pyramidal swindle maintained at gunpoint to guarantee the continued entry of naive people. Those who are expropriated a third of everything they earn to pay the pensions of current retirees, nothing is saved, but of course with the aging of the population, the system is unsustainable. A servant of yours is producing 4 films against the welfare state, one about pensions. It is already out there. 500,000 people have seen it. You can see it. It is neither justice nor social. The problem of pensions, Professor Bagus appears. Another one on education, another one on health, and now I am finishing the one on climate change, which is not to be missed. Bismarck was the creator of the continental social security system based on pay-as-you-go. It was a great deception. He promised that from then on, all workers would be covered with a pension. When they retired at the age of 65 or 70, the life expectancy at that time was 50. No one would get there. In the parliament, Richter stood up and said to him, Chancellor Bismarck, are you aware that if this project goes ahead, you are going to convert the whole German people? You are going to make the whole German people servants of the state for life and dependent on the state for life? And Chancellor Bismarck replies, that is precisely my aim. To have all the German people dependent on the state. And he succeeded. And from that dust, the subsequent mud, a world war, another world war, and so on. But let us not think that only that has happened in Germany. It is happening here. General Franco arrived. He kept the capitalization system and the savings of all the workers. And in '64, he created the so much talked about system that unites the pension society based on the distribution. Do not say this. It is not politically correct to say that nothing of what the socialists maintain in Spain, whether left or right, comes from General Franco. The only way out is to return to capitalization. And we explain in this film and in my writings how such a thing could be done. What about health care? 2.5 million Spaniards have a privilege to choose whether they want public or private. Among them, me, are the civil servants of the state. Every year, invariably what idiots they are. It is a sample of idiots in the Spanish society. 80% choose the private one for a reason, excluding the former vice president of the government. And when she took the COVID to Mrs. Calvo, there she was in the international Rubel, and not in the Cojonuda public health of the state. That in spite of all the effort and heroism of its doctors, nurses, suffers from all the effects of the impossibility of economic calculation and socialism that I have just mentioned. And therefore it is also an impossible vision. And education, another leg, well, what I propose, what the film says, is to give the option to anyone who wants to go to the private system, no one is harmed here, and to deduct what they pay for a private policy from their income tax. And we will see what the decision is, but not by vote, but with the feet of ordinary citizens, without harming or coercing anyone. Education, why do the states fight over education? Why do the Catalans want Madrid education? Very simple. to brainwash the citizenry and make them submissive. Take note, 1548. Author, I do not know if I have made a mistake in the date. Etienne de la Boétie. Essay on voluntary servitude. Is it explained? You see, already in the 16th century, it was not yet the middle, the 16th century. Why are we willing to be slaves of the state? And we accept like sheep, B. And one of the reasons he gives is that out of habit and because we are educated in that way. We go beyond the family scheme, where there is a father and a mother who tell the children when they are small what they have to do. That paternalism, we think that organically has to exist also at a social level, and there has to be someone in charge. But there are other reasons, always the one who rules, is covered with a sacred aura. It is the Pharaoh appointed by God, or the absolute king appointed by God, or the contemporary gods, popular sovereignty, democracy. Then, of course, we have to obey. But there are other reasons, which Etienne de la Boétie also mentions. There is always a group of acolytes, a Praetorian Guard, who suck up to the one in charge because they live off him, especially in the universities, what my law calls the caste. And then comes the last straw. The ruler is a specialist in corrupting our soul. He gives us alpistas and subsidies and makes us dependent for life. Because if unemployment insurance is created, why shouldn't there be unemployment insurance? Of course, obviously, I am left in the street and I have nothing, unemployment insurance. But do you know what unemployment insurance generates? Unemployment. Incentives to find work disappear. Now the government is discussing following community guidelines. Man, we would have to deliver in exchange for what? Let's see if we can. Impossible. But by two ways. Not only by way of incentives that they are destroyed to get jobs, but the cost of unemployment insurance, which is financed by taxes, in turn destroys sustainable jobs that are not seen. So, both ways, unemployment insurance generates unemployment. And poverty assistance, which was the quote that was made to me, and I'm very grateful, by the president of LA at his inauguration, generates poverty. There is a problem in the United States, the New Frontier President Johnson, there is a poverty problem, the state is going to solve it. Food stamps for single mothers in the United States. Do you know what happened? What do you think happened? Single mothers increased threefold. Of course, they pay me for free. So come on. Single mothers, single mothers, single mothers, single mothers. Be careful with aid to poverty, and especially with international aid to poverty. It corrupts and destroys third world countries. Because you should not give a poor person a free fish, but you should teach him to fish and give him a fishing rod. And the fishing rod means accumulated capital and savings. And I have one leg left. I am not going to get into this leg because it is very morbid. I am just going to make an observation. Climate change. There is a neoclassical economist, William Northash. He gets the Nobel Prize in economics because he says the following. He says, man, this climate change thing is very dangerous. Yes, but watch out. Be careful. Let's not take measures whose marginal cost is higher than the expected benefit. Cost is higher than the expected benefit. Then, when the next support measure, subsidy for renewables, etc., has a higher cost than the possible benefit or reduction of damage in 30 or 40 years, that is when we have to stop. And they give him the Nobel Prize, the great genius. The argument seems acceptable to me, despite coming from a neoclassical. But there is a fundamental problem which is not Austrian, and he failed to finish it off, and it is the following. It is impossible for the state, the governors, the experts, to get the information regarding the marginal costs and the benefits of these actions. It acts completely blindly, just as the Soviet state did with Gazprom, and thus squandering society's scarce wealth and hurting especially the most vulnerable. Not to mention that climate change also has many benefits, because CO2 is a fertilizer for plants. It is going to be done, the earth, the planet, completely green. And let the whole of Siberia be made green and arable, mind you, producing wheat. And not to mention that in all the models, the supposed damages are never valued today, discounting by interest rate. In economic terms, everything that is being done in this field is completely unreasonable. Absolutely nothing should be done. Because if there is one thing that characterizes the market economy, it is its ability to adapt. The free market economy, led by creative human beings, entrepreneurs like you and me, has already shown throughout history that it is capable of adapting to the most satiating circumstances. I will give you an example since we have a visitor, and then you are going to introduce yourselves at the end from New York. Take the newspaper archives, end of the 19th century, big headlines, the world is going to end. There is a problem that we have detected, an insoluble problem. Do you know what it was? Horse excrement in the cities. They only rode horses and carts, and the excrement was 0.5 meter, 1 meter, all the rest. Then they come from the Club of Rome, they extrapolate to this population growth. We are going to stay, the world is going to stop, we have to stop the world, wealth, etc., because we are going to die in excrement. Well, look, mutatis mutandis, what is said today in relation to climate change? It was not necessary to stop the world, nor did anything happen, because shortly after, someone had the idea of making a combustion engine. All the excrement problems were solved. And on that combustion engine, on the shoulders of the combustion engine, on the shoulders of the explosion engine, the greatest horn of plenty in the history of mankind has been produced. And I am not in the pay of any fossil fuel company, but what is absurd is that fossil fuel research is banned, and the Pope State, who is supposed to know more than anyone else. And why? What if we think of something else? No, he has not banned research on combustion engines. Listen, if we come up with a combustion engine that is able to reduce CO2 by 1/3, no. Electric. But what arrogance, fatal arrogance. The title of Hayek's last book, Thinking They Are Gods. They think they are gods. Legitimized to direct our lives, and this with respect to climate change. But there is another point, I have 2 or 3 left and we are done. And that is that Millet insists that what he calls collectivism, socialism, I call statism, is intrinsically immoral. Or by contrast, that the market economy, the capitalist system, is the only system, not only dynamically efficient, but moral. Among other things, and I explain this in my books, because efficiency and morality and ethics are 2 sides of the same coin. What is just, if justice is understood correctly, with respect for private property, cannot be inefficient, and what is efficient cannot be unjust. That efficiency and justice can be combined randomly as one wishes is the result of the sick mind of the so-called welfare economists, including Samuelson with his social welfare function, etc. It is intrinsically unjust socialism. And we understand it all now, because it is based on violence and coercion. And perhaps the most typical characteristic of human beings is our creative capacity to freely create and discover things. And not to be put in a concentration camp, to be fined, to be deprived of half of our income until July, to be told what we have to do or what we cannot do. And do not think that I am exaggerating. As soon as you leave college and get a job, you are going to spend most of your time defending yourselves for the state, reading the official state bulletin, seeing what they are going to intervene in, how they are going to prosecute you. That in that environment, there is a creative entrepreneur who is able to pull this off, makes him a hero. Here my law is completely right. Because practically we are not allowed to work in freedom or create in freedom. It is intrinsically immoral. Socialism is not only a tragedy of history that has condemned millions of people to death, and a tragedy because many of them have died thinking that they were dying for something just. In historical terms, it is not only an impossibility in scientific terms, but it is the greatest immorality conceivable. Statism, another very important idea developed by my law in his speech. And then my law says, which is that it is so obvious that the doomsayers of Malthus, we will talk about Malthus, have failed, and that they are very tenacious. And then the Club of Rome, Armstrong, the world is going to stop because the oil stocks are going to run out, and so on. And then comes the famous bet between Julian Simon, Dr. Honoris Causa from the University of Navarra, and Ehrlich, the prophet of tragedy and emergency in all areas, who wants to justify stopping the world, humanity, because we are going to stay and we are going to die of hunger. And Simon says, I bet you that here in 20 years there is much more abundance than everything you say, and that everything has gone down in price. And Simon won the bet. But the Club of Rome is still stubborn, and then they create the Club of Rome, the Davos Forum, because this is very dangerous, and we have to make a kind of world trilateral, a world government that runs our lives. We are full of mouths, and even Pope Francis asks for a world government to end all the problems. A deification of human reason. Human reason. It has been so successful, it is so evident that new flags must be sought, especially after the fall of the Berlin Wall, and what flags they discover, what flags they seek. There are practically no proletarians left. We have not said that they are emerging at a rate of 70 million a year from poverty. We must seek new victims, real or imaginary victims, to victimize, to agglutinate their hatred against the established order of the market, and to justify our intervention as social engineers. And my law refers expressly to the artificial conflict between men and women. There is no such conflict in a market economy based on the equality of all before the law. The same could be said to the conflict with the LGBTI minority, Hayekar, whatever you want. Or another new flag, the egalitarianism, is that there is a tragic thing that the world is unequal. Obviously this is tragic. How can it be that Huerta de Soto has so much money and I am a poor student and I cannot make ends meet? That is unfair. How can this be solved? Well, it's very simple. We cut off Huerta de Soto's head and we all share his money because the law explains it very well. In the static conception of the market of the neoclassical economists, as everything is given, it is assumed that the pie is given. That is the term my law uses. And if the pie is given, it is redistributed. And the more it is redistributed, the more we gain, yes or no? No, no. Because the process is dynamic and it argues a deception. The richest Spaniard in the world, let's see, who is he? Mr. Amancio Ortega. Amancio Ortega, owner of Zara. Amancio Ortega's fortune, according to the latest data, 80 billion euros. Well then, come on, egalitarianism, all his fortune is expropriated. His entire fortune is expropriated and distributed among the 8 billion human beings. How much does each one get? 10 euros. They have a sandwich, a McDonald's, and zero. And zero. Back to square one. One hand in front, one hand behind. But along the way, we have left all the Zara factories, the thousands of employees it employs, all the satisfied consumers, all of that dead. Because the poor man should not be given a fish, because tomorrow it will rot. You have to give him a fishing rod. If a country wants to get out of poverty, what it has to do is to court the capitalists and those who save, so that they accumulate more and more capital. Economic theory shows that workers' wages depend on what they produce, on their productivity, and they are more productive the more capital equipment they have at their disposal. The American worker, the American farmer, earns 100 times more per month than the Indian farmer. Not because he works harder, not because he is smarter, simply because the Indian farmer continues to plow the field with a Roman plow and 2 oxen. While the American farmer uses a state-of-the-art John Deere tractor. Have you ever been on one? It has a computer, GPS. In one morning it plows 100 times the extension. What the Indian does, it is 100 times more productive. That is why he earns 100 times more. But to have a tractor, mind you, it has not been by cutting off the heads of the rich. Has been based on encouraging the accumulation of capital and savings, courting those who accumulate. To those who accumulate capital and to the capitalists, there is nothing that does more harm than taxes on corporate profits and above all taxes on capital. But it doesn't hurt those who have had their heads cut off. Ciao, that too. But what difference does it make? The perverse vein of envy is always used. Those it hurts are precisely the most vulnerable. Then we already know what Venezuela has to do, what Argentina has to do. If they want to get out of poverty, attract capital, protect, as I do, capitalists and savers, not to distort the market, not to aggravate them with high taxes. Just the opposite of what the demagogues sell us, deceiving and manipulating the citizenship. The citizenship. And I conclude, my last book, published by Routledge, is entitled The Deadliest Virus, Statism and the Economy. What is the deadliest virus infecting the human soul? Statism. It creeps surreptitiously into our soul, and almost without realizing it, we accept the whole scheme of the agenda and have already fallen into its nets. Even myself, it happens even to myself sometimes. The only way to save ourselves from this lethal infection is to get vaccinated. And what is the vaccine? Here it is necessary to be vaccinated in this case. The study of the correct economic science, which is that of the Austrian School of Economics. I do not impose any moral principle. I already said it the first day in class, that I was going to make my value judgments explicit, but we are in a scientific class. I give freedom for anyone here to have other assessments. If someone is like Marx, read his millennialist poems and wants to destroy the world, the information and knowledge you gain in this class is invaluable, because you will know what to do. Put stones in the process of social cooperation, expropriate and cut off the head. To the millionaires and capitalists, smash the currency. Lenin said, the best way to destroy the West is to destroy its currency. We have all the examples, well in Argentina. But don't think that the dollar and the euro are anything to shoot for. In 3 years, the much-praised European Central Bank has depreciated the value of the euro by almost 25%. It is true that in Argentina, this is how much the peso depreciates per month or per day. Per month or per day, I don't know anymore, per month. Therefore, these are all relative issues. Relative. They are all involved in statism. If you look at the fights in Parliament, the discussion is not about how to dismantle the state. The discussion is, I want power for me to impose my agenda. The agenda of Vox, I want power for me to impose my agenda. The progressive agenda, we are the progressives. I want power for me to impose my agenda, the eclectic, lukewarm, social democratic agenda of the PP. Everybody wants power, but there is someone missing to say, power is a virus. But there has been a disciple of yours truly, and it has been one of the most joyful reasons in my life, that contrary to my recommendation, you will see in my articles, I say, do not destroy your life by dedicating yourself to politics. He has dedicated himself, and by chance it is destiny. The hand of God, he would say, and I say, he has ended up as president of the Argentine Republic. He has immolated his life. You do not know what it is like to dedicate oneself to politics, especially in a country like Argentina. No, it is not that it is especially bad. It is like Spain. It is to destroy one's life. He is going to immolate himself in this. Look, I don't know what will happen with my law and your program in Argentina. I only know two things. One, that we already owe you something of immense value to mankind. And that is to have brought to the agenda and made popular the idea of freedom. How many are now saying, I didn't know it, and now that I hear it, I realize that is what I am, an anarcho-capitalist? Look, it does not matter what happens in Argentina, although I wish it to be very successful in Argentina, but what my law has already achieved has an immense value because I have been repeating the same things for 40 years, and now it has a universal echo. Therefore, good for my law. And two, if it works out moderately well for you, if you are the one who organizes it, then it would be to give the Nobel Prize in Economics to Israel Kirzner as the highest living representative of the Austrian School of Economics, and to President Javier Milei as someone capable of putting that ideology into practice. Thank you very much.